We're live on YouTube now.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And are we recording? Because I know we've had that issue a couple of times.
It will be archived on YouTube. So there certainly is a recording of the proceeding there. If you like, I can record it starting right now as well.
I didn't know the protocol, whether you, I've just seen the record sometimes on the Zoom and sometimes not. So I wasn't sure if it's recording on YouTube, that's
It is.
fine. I just wanted to make sure it was getting recorded.
Yep. Well, if no one is opposed to it, I will record the Zoom meeting as well, just to be double sure. Okay, everyone okay with that?
Sure.
All right, we are recording now. So as I was saying, my takeaways from last night, or really my point of last night, was to get some further input. From my perspective, there are a number of areas that we need to monitor very closely, probably on a weekly, if not more frequent basis. And I like to look at this kind of how to eat an elephant, which is one bite at a time. I think we've got one very clear goal and deadline in front of us, which is first reading. And then in my view, we ought to take and make good use of the time between first and second reading to really work through those final issues. And on some of the watch items, I think we would be wise to take all the time we have to gather information and to make the best estimate and educated guess we can. And you know, we still may be guessing by the end of that period. I don't know, but time is our friend, I'll say, on many of these points. So from my perspective, for the best use of today's time would be really to prepare for what we should not be surprised will happen in first reading, which is the council providing very clear direction of their intention and to make modifications to the budget in first reading to produce a budget that has a tax rate increase of no more than 2%. And so given that clear direction back, I think it was on April 8th, I've been assembling my team and working through and trying to understand what that might look like on the municipal side. And I know Sandy and his leadership team have done tremendous work, hours upon hours of your leadership team doing a very similar effort. So in the interest of having a smooth meeting on the 6th, and maybe that's too much to expect, it would be great for this group to have some sense of how we're going to accomplish that goal, at least order of magnitude. In my view, I don't think we need to get into minutia necessarily, but that might be inevitable. But it would be terrific to find a path forward. So I think we all need to keep our relations strong. I think they'll get tried through this process. So to the extent that we can get through this first step unscathed, I think it's going to prepare us well for the next 6 or 8 weeks. There's going to be some difficult conversation. So that's my take on things, Peter.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I know I'll encourage anybody that was there. I know John and Betsy were there. I'm sure some of you may have been. I mean, some of my takeaways, you know, there were a couple of different areas we touched. We had the Augusta delegation there, of both the representatives and senators. And they talked a little bit about what's going on, and they kind of talked about, you know, the good news is that they've got some funds that are available. They mentioned there's about $500 million surplus, but they did kind of say, Moody's, I know, came out and said they think the state between now and maybe this time next year might be as much as $1 billion sort of in arrears on revenue. So they shared that. They did say, you know, just as Tom pointed out, a lookout point might be maybe less risk to the budget this year, but as they start to work, they did organize a task force that's going to meet this summer to look at the impact of this on revenues, that there may be some adjustments in next year's cycle. There's no prediction, but, you know, again, I think that's one of Tom's watch points. We pivoted from that to Karen Martin, kind of did an analysis, at least what she's seeing economically. She shared historically the unemployment rate in Scarborough has been about 270 people. That's sort of the average. She thinks, and I think the highest was somewhere around 700 at some point in time, but she's projecting that, you know, it may be like 1,600 people. So there's going to be a fair number of people impacted on lost incomes that will be on unemployment. The other thing we did hear, we heard from Jay that talked a little bit about what's happening in sort of the construction development pipeline. You know, the good news is he kind of shared that the projects that are underway still seem to be in front of the board, still asking for, you know, progress and are still progressing. We did ask about, are there any new projects on the list? And we, you know, that's to be determined. So John, you've probably got a better sense. Any other takeaways for you from last night?
You know, I thought it was an educational meeting. It was productive and somewhat eye-opening. So what I had been looking at was, you know, where are we at risk, right? In terms of, we think there's going to be a shortfall at the state level. Typically, I would have expected Scarborough to be reasonably sheltered from that because we are minimum receivers on the school side and I'll say small receivers for revenue sharing. But when they started talking about the tools that the state has to make up the shortfall that may happen next year, it kind of, it created some caution for me. Like, and some of the precedents that had been set in the past were like, what if we don't make a school payment? Well,
Right.
So I think, and then, or cut, you know, revenue sharing is actually based on actual receipts. So there wouldn't necessarily have to be any action there if tax revenues and sales tax revenues go down. So I think those are some scenarios that we should be understand that there's risk factors out there and be prepared for how we might adapt should any of those come to fruition next year. I'm not sure that we want to budget them as the expected value right now because I don't think there's a lot of things in motion. You know, the state did get over $1 billion, I think 1.25 billion as part of the initial CARES Relief Act. And the intent with at least a portion of that was for it to flow to municipalities to help offset some of the costs of COVID. They're, I think, hoping to be able to change some of the guidelines for the use of those funds to be able to offset revenue losses associated with COVID. So there's some negotiation or lobbying going on in that effort. And you know, my takeaway was that it's probably unlikely that some of that is going to offset what I perceive to be reductions in revenue sharing. So I think Tom said it pretty well and more clearly than I did, that there's a lot of unknowns right now.
Yeah.
I'm not in a position where I want to overreact and just slash everything for the thought that there's a lot of unknowns, but we should be prepared for, you know, some difficult decisions, if not at budget time, as we move through next year. And that's something that I wanted to toss out there as well is I believe we have in our charter opportunities that if it looks like there are some significant revenue shortages to make amendments to our budget. I'm not so clear on the school side that we have that flexibility. So I'd like to understand, you know, where some of those trigger points are. And I think we should factor that into our budgeting process as well.
Yeah, and I think building a little bit on what John said, and I think April, to your question last time was about, you know, is this just a momentary sort of 1 year blip or is it something else? I think a little bit of what we heard last night was this could be it may be this year and next year. And I think that's what John's referring to a little bit, that this may be a little longer horizon. At least that was my takeaway. This might be a little longer period. So just as we do this, just be conscious of that. And did anybody else anybody else listen? I know Betsy, you were there. Do you have any perspectives on what you heard last night?
Sure. I think, you know, the revenue side, you know, is nothing a BOE really can do anything about. And, you know, we totally understand that. But when we get to the mill rate, you know, that's a critical factor. And so I think it's shaping up on the council to really figure out where we think we're going to stand with that revenue, looking at what other towns are doing in addition to, you know, what we're hearing from the state and how much risk that we decide to go forward with, because I think the goal and I won't speak for everyone, at least my goal, yes, we would have the opportunity to reduce the budget through our charter, but I think everyone feels that, or I would assume that stability is probably our best factor. So, you know, to the extent that we don't have a crystal ball, we probably want to err on the more conservative side, but, you know, in terms of how we're forecasting revenues and things like that, put together the best, most realistic budget that we can and see if we can live within that. I think it would, you know, if the state starts doing things like they had done in the past, and I think I brought some of these forward actually from a workshop of MME, cutting the home exemption where we have to fund more of that, cutting revenue sharing, cutting a school, you know, the school, you know, we don't know if they're going to do any of that. We can kind of guess that excise taxes, you know, may go down. So we don't want to cut to the bone thinking on our revenue side, but I think you'll see, to the extent that you guys stay involved in the process, the town council kind of really going into depth on where we stand with that. You can see, you know, John was maybe a little more optimistic. I'm thinking, you know, we're probably going to need to cut somewhere between 8 to 12% or so of what we think we're going to get for revenue. So that's going to impact the mill rate calculation. So those are just some of the things, you know, that are going to be in front of us. And we just talked a lot about, you know, the great budget work that you guys have done so far, and that, you know, Tom has done that we haven't seen as much of, that, you know, we're going to get a taste of today, in terms, as we get to see your workshop yesterday. So we get to see our a lot of stuff on our side today. So yeah, good, wide ranging discussion. We plan to have more.
So does anybody have any questions or concerns, or did they watch it and have any other observations? No? Okay, well, I think with a little bit of a backdrop, and as we said, it just seems like every day we wake up, there's new pieces of information. So hopefully we'll start getting some sunshine information, not the alternative. So Tom, I don't know, between you and Sandy, how we're, you know, I think there's two budgets to kind of weave through. I didn't know if you were going to lead off, Tom, or you or Sandy. Any preference on how to walk us through the?
I certainly can, if that's helpful.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Larissa's going to be running the screen here, so I do have a couple of slides just to help keep me focused. And I must admit, in preparation for this meeting, I wasn't exactly sure what level of detail. I assure you, like Sandy, we have been working kind of feverishly, so this is a work in progress. This first slide is something that you know, we've done in the past to try to just give us a sense as we work through these things. What are the certain targets, and what does it take to get there? And so, given the fact the council has been quite clear in their expectation, in first reading at least, is to get to a 2%, no more than 2% on the tax rate, that would require an effort of about $2.5 million taken out of the net budget. So just that's kind of the backdrop, and you'll see below that, there's obviously further work to be done. So next. So I wanted to start just, you know, advising people the work that at least we put in before the budget was presented on April 8th. We sensed that things were different and made some last minute changes, if you will. I'm just having trouble seeing the screen here. So I just wanted to take a moment for, I guess, everyone's benefit, just to appreciate the sort of effort that we put in and that's baked into the budget already. So we essentially zeroed out travel and training, supply lines, not quite zero, but I assure you we have scoured, you know, as much as we think is reasonably possible. New equipment, and miscellaneous areas. At that time, we recognized that we needed to take some fairly decisive action on staff. And so my presentation on the 8th included removal of any COLA increases for non-union staff, Those are the folks that, we have direct control over, so to speak. I guess I shouldn't characterize it like that. I don't want to abuse that relationship, but it's unlike the collective bargaining arrangements where we need to negotiate such matters. I sensed early on that this was something that really was an essential part of going forward, at least starting the conversation. And then took some other actions regarding eliminating 2 positions and delaying other unfilled vacancies, so kind of a hiring freeze. So those are the sorts of things that we did and that are in the budget that was presented on the 8th and are still there. So that effort produced a net budget increase of about 2.1%.
And Tom, how much those total adjustments you made were about $1.2 million or something? I can't.
That's about right. Yeah. Now, to be fair, that's $1.2 million from my department requests. Not all of those, even in a typical year, would have necessarily passed my test. But yeah, that's the order of magnitude in total. And this is just a high level. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of the fact that the town's already done, some thoughtful work in the work product, the budget that as it exists today. Now, since then, we've gone further and tried to look for additional cuts. So that number at the top is the net budget as of the 8th of April. We've taken further action. We've furloughed 10 part-time staff. These are folks in nearly every department. Not big money, but an important move, I think, to make given the circumstance. We found some money in the HRA utilization for the fire department. We've renegotiated our solid waste contracts. They had a year left, and we were able to approach them and renegotiate on more favorable terms. We've also made really decisive action, taken decisive action regarding 77 non-union staff members in the Department of Labor's WorkShare program. And bear with me, it gets a little confusing here. This WorkShare program, we're taking advantage for essentially a 90-day period. So it will be the months of May, June, and July. What's important about that is that spans 2 fiscal years. So this number shown under full-time staff WorkShare is the portion of savings in FY21 as a result of these decisions. And then you'll see 2 lines down, there's a use of fund balance WorkShare. That represents the 2 months in the current year. And I'll come back to that point. Also proposing to further reduce our capital request. We had proposed a buyout of the solar arrays that exist on both the community service maintenance building and the fire station. That's something we can pick up in future years. It's just most financially attractive to do it this year. And then there was some software we were looking to purchase that will help us manage all of our licenses, but in particular the marijuana related licenses, which we expect we'll have a dozen or so of to handle. But obviously that's something we can do without. So I failed to mention that earlier in this current year, we knew that we were running over budget on a couple of key lines. In particular, the assessor was appropriately granting abatements, and so our overlay was overspent significantly. Our legal line was overspent, and to a much lesser extent, but general assistance was overspent. And because of that, I instituted a overall budget curtailment in late November. I'm pleased to say that served its purpose, and it covered those expenses and produced additional savings. And so I'm proposing that we use fund balance from the current year, and I can provide far more detail for anyone that wants to see where these come from. But I'm proposing that we use fund balance that we can document that's produced out of the current year, partially through the WorkShare program and also through the curtailment action to help next year's budget, FY21. And combined, that's about $700,000. And again, we have that detail that I can share. I'm sure my members of Finance Committee will be interested to know the details of that, but I just wanted to give a high level overview for this group. So that produces, you know, a net savings, just over $1 million. And then if you go on, Larissa. Based somewhat in part to the discussion last night, but it's something I've been intending to do right along. I think we need to lower our sights on the revenue sharing estimate. And I'm looking at least at this point, a 20% decrease. That's a $300,000 reduction to our non-property tax revenue. And so when you look at the savings on the prior slide and this revenue adjustment in the wrong direction, but I think it's necessary and appropriate, it produces yet again, you know, another new net budget, and that is about a $776,000 change to the positive, if you will. At the same time, as I mentioned in my opening comments, there are a number of watch items that that I think we need to be paying very close attention to. I think all of these, with the exception of excise, could potentially be good news. I didn't see it to be my response. I didn't think I had the authority to remove the extra money that's been placed in the budget for expansion of the senior property tax relief program. So I offer that up as a discussion point. I'm not sure if this is the right year to advance that. A laudable goal, but whether this is the timing is right is worth talking about. We have approached the unions. We approached both dispatch and police today regarding concessions in their current collective bargaining agreements, and we'll be approaching fire tomorrow or Friday, I don't recall. And I expect that we'll be able to deliver further savings based on those conversations. There's the potential for federal stimulus. I would not hazard a guess and certainly not budget for anything, but that's information that's potentially forthcoming, and that would be good news. Excise is something that at this point, you know, I don't propose an adjustment. Others may disagree with me, but that's a point that we need to watch. That's one of those that we should take all the time we have available, particularly due to the fact that, you know, we track this day to day. Right now, our receipts are underreporting because of the fact town hall is closed. In fact, no new car registrations can occur online. And so we do expect there's some pent up demand and there'll be revenue that flows in when we're able to get back and have some level of activity with our residents. Similarly, the governor's order allows a 30-day reprieve on even renewals of registrations 30 days after the emergency order is lifted. So though some of that money is coming in, we expect some of it, you know, people are just choosing not to do it until they have to. So I'm quite confident we will make budget for this year. The larger question is, how does that project into FY21? And that's a discussion, again, I think we need to have continually and adjust accordingly at a later date. And the last one is this bid premium. This is kind of a mysterious item. I do have about $200,000 in the budget. Today, I was on 2 rating calls for the upcoming spring bond issue. And I will say, talking to our financial advisor, he has sold a number of municipal bonds in the last couple of weeks, each of them fetching quite a high bid premium. And this is something that is unpredictable. It's something that we'll know well before second reading. And so that could be a piece of good news if we choose to, depending how we choose to use that, if it materializes and how we choose to use it.
Would it be 5 figures or 6 figures, Tom? Do you think closer? I mean, tens of thousands or?
No, hundreds of thousands. If I had to hazard a guess, I would say it could be as much as 250,000 more than I have budgeted. But we have the choice of how to use that. We can borrow less. We can pay our closing costs. You know, we can pay interest expense. And I've taken these matters to the Finance Committee over the last couple of years, and so it's going to be a piece of information we will know at a later date, and it may be good news. So go ahead, please.
With the use of fund balance, I know that there's some challenges with this fiscal year. Are we expecting to carry over a roughly flat fund balance into next year after accounting for the use of the items that you talked about, or what do we expect to change?
No, I'm proposing, I'm quite confident that we're going to close this year with an annual fund balance in the order of $700,000. And I recommend that we consider using that
Okay.
toward the effort next year. Again, I had the occasion to speak to the analysts today from the rating agencies, which is the real cautionary area here. And I expressed my intention to them. I didn't hear any opposition. And I think we can really make a compelling argument that this is demonstrated savings in a particular budget year. We're not dipping deeper into our fund balance. And after all, desperate times require desperate measures. And I think there's a very rational methodology behind this approach.
And Tom,
So- But
no, I'm going to say in the past, I know, as we look ahead and, what we might be bonding down the pike with big projects, where what they do look at is if we have to, from year to year, dip into the fund balance and actually reduce it. So John, I think if I understand what Tom's saying, what you suggested, is we're not going to dip into the fund balance that we had at the balance sheet at the end of last year. We're just going to use some of the surplus that gets generated from Tom's curtailment during the year.
Mhm.
So that shouldn't, I think you're saying, Tom, that that's not going to be perceived negatively by the underwriting community for bonds.
I don't believe so, because after all, these are resources that we have raised from our residents that have not been needed for one reason or another for operations. And so I think it's a very prudent and rational and reasonable use of fund balance, particularly if we're able to be very clear about the source of those monies. It's based on administrative actions we've taken to curtail spending for this exact purpose. So I think we can make a very persuasive argument without any harm.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you clarified that. Basically you took actions this year to ease the pain next year. And
yeah, I'm pleased that ended up being the result. The initial purpose was to plug holes that we expected in the current year. We did that and then some, and then we took additional actions this spring that have produced additional savings.
Okay.
Larissa, can you just go back to the prior page? No, the one before that. I'm sorry. So I think if you look, so just as we progress through our conversation, so I think Tom at the beginning showed what savings, what impact it would have at moving the mill rate. Tom shared that before the budget process, he saved about $1.2 million. What we're looking at on this page is about another $1 million. This $1 million on this page represents about a 5% reduction from the April 8th date. So, that's a pretty significant contribution Tom has found to help adjust the budget. I just think that's important to kind of put as a reference that Tom had done some heavy lifting before he went in, and he's doing additional heavy lifting. So you've probably reduced your budget from that submitted by your department heads by close to 10%, Tom? 8-9%?
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe the better metric is compare the net budget as it sits based on this proposal compared to last year's net budget, and it's actually down almost 2%. So
yeah, I think that's worth repeating. Can you say that again? So folks just...
Yeah, you see at the bottom there's a bit of a equation, simple one. So the first total was the net total starting on April 8th. The
Yeah.
savings I've just outlined, the revenue reduction that I suggest we make, and the net position is about 2% less than we were in the current fiscal year. And I guess to make a finer point related to tax rate, we did calculate a new tax rate based on the town's portion.
Yeah.
Can you flip to that? And again, we create an overall tax rate comp sheet that blends both town, school, and county. This is just the municipal portion. And so you'll see that 1.97% reduction on net ask or commitment to be raised through property taxes, and what the resulting impact on tax rate, it actually reduces when you factor in the valuation increase, by a penny.
Yeah.
By 9 cents rather.
Could we go
Oh.
back to the previous slide, please? And I don't know if there's a way to, I'm sure this will be out. Maybe I missed it and it was on the web.
Nope, it was done about, we finished this at about 4:58. So,
Yeah, absolutely. It's everybody's, so the, so the number there that you say is equivalent to 2020. I'm just looking at the budget book, page 3, and I'm trying to make that understanding there. Was a budget book, page 3, from the April 8th presentation was 18. So we're down almost 700K from that presentation, right?
on a net basis, yes.
Okay.
Essentially $1 million decrease in expenses and a $300,000 reduction in revenue, netting a change of 765, 381.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And so for listeners, that means, actually the request from taxpayers is less this year than it was last year. Is that fair, Tom?
Yeah, that is from the town side. Yes.
Yeah, from the town side. So actually, the net is going to be less tax requests from taxpayers than the prior year, which I think is just good to benchmark that.
Yeah. And then we have the county component is up 7.8%. We can't control that. That is what it is. And then we still have the school to discuss. So I just wanted to give you the picture from the municipal side.
And that's a good picture. That it still includes the revenue. So, if we're, you said you thought we'd have about 11 or 12 marijuana businesses. I know the state is behind on that. We're projecting 60K revenue from that. So there would be a number of, spots. I would wonder, to talk through, we don't have to do it in this meeting, but to talk through, where we think some of these revenues, will continue to fall, like boat excise tax. Are we thinking we're gonna be in the range on that? And there's just a lot of them. It makes up 20-something $million of our budget overall revenue. So I see that we've reduced revenue by 300. I'd feel more comfortable before we say it's a reduction, to make sure that we've kind of had a come to a meeting of the minds on where on the revenue projections.
Well, fair enough. It's my prerogative to start the conversation, and I am. And I respect your opinion, but I don't necessarily agree that there should be an across the board cut of 8 to 12%. I think we need to be more thoughtful.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about across the board. I was actually reacting more to what Peter was saying, not what you said.
So I freely admit that we'll know more as time goes on, but I offer this up as what I believe is a reasonable starting point and rational starting point for the discussion. And I offer these changes up without reservation at this point.
Thank you, Tom. Does anybody from the Board of Education side have any questions for Tom or clarity, or do you need anything else from sort of where Tom has kind of said he's landed as at least the start of our conversation this evening? No? Okay.
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
John, you okay? Anything else? You good?
Yeah, actually, that was a nice surprise. So
Yeah.
good work.
Yeah, totally agree. Thanks, Tom. That's great work. So Sarah, I don't know how you guys want to work through sort of your thoughts and where you are. I'll kind of kick it over to you and your team on what you'd like to do.
Yeah, thanks. I think for those of you who joined our meeting last night, we're just going to do probably a recap, something similar that we did then. So actually I'll pass it over to Kate, Kate's going to go through that, kind of talk through the, Kate and Sandy, I think, are going to talk through the process that they've gone through, similar to what you guys did, and then go through the details.
Sounds good.
So I could share the screen with our little working document that we used last night, if that would be helpful. And Sandy, maybe you want to sort of start the conversation. Let me see, can I share here?
Yeah.
Looks like it.
We have it now.
So since we did do it last night, I don't want to feel like we're going to replicate the whole presentation. So if we go too fast, let us know. If you have questions, you can ask along the way, or we can wait till the end, whatever is your pleasure. So as you can see in the yellow box, that was the FY20 budget.
Sandy, can I just, I think some of us, I'm not sure if all, John, were you on the call last night for the finance committee of the school?
I was on for the bulk of it.
Okay. But Sandy, I think part of the, this may be a different audience. I don't know how people are listening in, but there may be some people in the audience that didn't listen in last night. So keeping it brief is great, but also just give enough so people in the audience can kind of follow along, if you will. That makes sense.
So the majority of the slides really talk about, we have different tiers. We have tier 1, 2, 3, 4, and tier 1 has less of an impact on the organization, where tier 4 has much more significant impact on the students and obviously the school system. So that's what we shared last night, and we'll kind of walk through that with you. And we've been pretty transparent with this throughout the organization. And, we have a lot of stakeholders just like you do, and we feel it's important for people to understand the proposed budget. So again, we have the yellow box, which is the approved budget for FY20. And then the next box is the general fund proposed budget for FY21, which includes reduced level services. And the third box is the general fund proposed budget FY21 with investments. And when we talk about investments, those are investments for our students where we feel we needed to add certain, whether they're positions or materials or whatever, significant increases to maintain the level of services that we want to provide. So obviously throughout this process, some of those investments did not make it in the budget. Okay, again, you can piggyback if I leave anything off, feel free to jump in.
Alrighty.
So tier 1, again, we're not really excited about these reductions, but these are, I would say, a starting place for us as we think about what we need to put into the budget and what we need to take out of the budget. It's been pretty clear from the state DOE that as students come back to the school system, we've been advised as we reopen schools, whenever that is, that we have sufficient medical staff coverage. And we're not there yet. Within particularly our elementary schools, we have nurses that are doing their duties in the main office, and we are quite strapped with the number of nurses given the 3 elementary schools. So as much as this budget isn't going to be talking a lot about what we're putting in, I will acknowledge that there are 2 nurses positions that we feel is very important for the safety of our students. And particularly in this day and age, more students are going to be come down with certain viruses, and we want to be proactive and expand the clinic and make sure that we can have some spaces for our nurses. So that's some add-ons that we've added. Also, we're very mindful of professional development. As students enter back into the school system, we want to make sure we have support systems in place, and that could be particularly in the summer. If students did not make much progress, we want to make sure that we can provide additional services. Very mindful of social emotional of what students are going through, particularly with this virus. And so we've put some money in for professional development. Okay.
Can I ask you a quick question
Sandy?
on that, on those
Yeah.
inputs?
Oh.
Do you think there's any money, since those are really specifically COVID related? You may touch on this somewhere else, but is there any money that we feel we would get reimbursed for those very specific COVID expenses?
I could jump in on that one, Betsy. We have received some guidance from the Department of Education regarding stimulus money that's coming to the K-12 schools in Maine and all over the country. And what they've told us so far, we haven't got final numbers, but they've told us that the money is to be allocated within the states based on the Title I formula that they use for federal funds already with schools. Unfortunately or fortunately, Scarborough is such an affluent community that we don't receive a lot of Title I funds. They've told us from the Department of Ed here in Maine that we can expect to receive about 83% of last year's Title I monies in stimulus money for COVID relief, or whatever label you want to put on it. It's through the CARES Act. So for us, that would amount to about $120,000, maybe $150,000. And obviously that would be great. And we would be really excited to be able to use that for some of these additional unexpected expenses. But we're not thinking we're going to get massive amounts of money from the feds.
So it's not a 1-for-1. We don't get to put in and say, this is what we had to spend and get it back. It's going to be.
That's not the model that we're hearing right now. I mean, who knows? It seems to be changing every day, but as far as what's been put out there so far for guidance, they're linking it with the Title I model.
It's interesting. I wonder if the town could be helpful here, because what we're hearing on the municipal side is that the only municipal expenses covered are COVID, specifically COVID related, which at this point, we can identify some, but it's not vast amounts at this point. So we should maybe have a conversation offline to see if there's a way we can repackage this and access that federal money.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a way that we as a team, as a community can benefit from it, that would be very cool. And maybe we can put our heads together on that.
Okay, does your budget include the 114,000 or something that we do anticipate getting through the relief package?
No.
Okay, so that it could be gravy that comes down later.
Right, and it wouldn't be considered general fund money. It would be very similar to a title grant that we keep in a separate fund and expend through an application process.
Ah, okay.
That, again, that's what we're hearing now. We haven't got the final word on any of this.
And I did attend. Sorry to
go ahead, Diane.
Okay, I was just going to add that I did attend a meeting today where Pender Macon, the DOE Education Commissioner, was present, and she spoke to this specifically, very much in line with what Kate is saying in terms of we should expect right around 80% of our Title I allocation. And again, those are targeted funds, and so we have to expend them within certain areas, basically related to COVID-19 expenses.
So maybe these nurses can move over to those targeted funds. Is that a possibility? Or
it may be possible. I think it's going to depend, again, once they package all of that to us together and provide that level of detail.
Is it okay to move on? Okay.
Hey, sorry, Sandy, real quick before you do that, I was just wondering if you could, or maybe you or Kate could just speak through how people sort of read this document or follow along in the document in terms of the numbers and how like the boxes that you're going to show with the tiers relate to the first page that you showed, just so, or if they don't, people can follow along. And I did also want to just mention that this document is posted on the school website on the Finance Committee page under our supporting materials for the meeting last night, if anyone does want to access it. But yeah, Kate, I don't know if that's something you can talk to.
Sure, that's a really good point, Sarah. It isn't linked in any way in this meeting, but it's the same document that we used for our meeting last night. So yeah, if I sort of scooch back up to the top here, what we've got is our starting point in the blue, as Sandy pointed out. This is the budget that's currently on the table, if you will, for the school board. The school board having approved that in the beginning of April. And then in each one of these tiers that Sandy's just started describing, we show the change in the general fund, the change in the expenditures gross, the change in revenues, which Sandy hasn't had a good chance to get to, change in capital budget. And then at the bottom, we're looking at this number here is a reduction to the net budget or tax request for the school side.
So just to finish up real quick, the discretionary funds basically is materials, supplies, and across the board, we cut that just over 184,000. And then with our projects that need to be done in the capital projects, particularly in the district, we've really looked carefully at what we could put off, at least for next year. And an example of that could be like cameras for the buses. It could be capital projects. And so that's just about $348,000 plus. And then Kate has worked really hard on the fund balance. I'm not sure if you want to add anything, Kate, but it's about 400,000. And that does leave us with some additional fund balance, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
Right, and I didn't represent it in this list, but in much the same way that Tom talked about generating additional fund balance in FY20 that we can then carry forward to FY21, we've been looking really closely at what the impacts are of having school closed for 2 months, 3 months, as well as some of the additional expenses that are being created. But essentially, to make a very long story short, we've gone through a new projection of what our year-end fund balance is going to look like, bearing in mind that we are still paying all of our regular staff. According to the governor's executive order, all school staff are considered essential and must be paid. Salaries and benefits are still pretty much the same, but we are having significant reductions in some areas, and we're looking to be able to generate more fund balance. And so in much the same way that the town manager has said he'd like to bring that forward and use it to mitigate the tax request, we're looking to do the same thing. So that $400,000 on this sheet is in addition to $300,000 that was in our original budget estimate as non-tax revenue.
Can I just ask Sandy, did you allude to the fact that there may be additional savings that you're choosing to keep as fund balance as opposed to rolling it forward?
I think we took a fairly conservative approach to this. We didn't want to give it all up just for emergency situations. So right now we feel comfortable giving the 400,000.
Yeah, we're looking at about splitting the difference and maybe leaving about 400,000 in the bank. And I did run through some numbers in the finance committee meeting last night, and I just kind of reeled them off. I didn't have a document to go with that, but I've prepped up something that puts it on paper that I haven't even had a chance to share with anybody yet, but figure out a way that we could put that out so people can see how we came up with those numbers.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And Kate, there's a statutory maximum that you can carry over as fund balance, right?
We can't carry more than 3% of our initial budget in fund balance, but there's a little fine print to that because you have 3 years to apply it to non-tax revenue in a 3-year period. So you can actually carry more than the 3% as long as you spend it down. And of course, this isn't really going to hit 3%, so it's not a problem. But you're right, there's a limit on what you can carry.
other questions about tier one? So we go to tier two. Becomes a little more difficult for the staff and for the administrators to swallow this, but you know, we want to be responsible and thoughtful, knowing what we're faced with out here in the economy. So discretionary funds, again, it's just all those services and materials and trying to do this in a way so it won't have a huge impact on our students, because certainly this does impact classroom teachers and what they work with. And that's just over 141,000. In addition, we have eliminated non-instructional positions at central office and IT and administrative support. That's 3 positions. We've eliminated non-instructional positions, bus drivers, which is equivalent to 3 bus drivers. And those are unfilled positions. So not that it makes it easier, but at least it's not going to impact certain individuals. And then we have lead teacher positions, 5 through 12. And we have a half of a position that we are going to not fill. In addition to that, we're going to eliminate after-school programs based on the lowest participation at the high school and middle school, and we'll eliminate Wentworth school clubs. And again, you can see the figures for that. Really, the Wentworth school, middle school, and high school is just over 55,000, and as far as clubs, and then the sports at the middle school and high school is just over $17,000.
With the staff reductions, the current staff reductions, do you anticipate those staff would be assigned to other positions within the department, or would they be reductions in force?
Those would be laid off.
Yeah.
I just want to mention to Sandy, as we're going, that I had a question yesterday. This bar at the bottom, this bright green that says total reduction to tax request, that's cumulative. So now you're going to see tier 1 plus tier 2 in this bar. And then as we go forward, it gives you a running total. Other questions? Should I scroll up?
Okay, so we're moving into tier 3. Okay, so what we have is after-school programs at the high school and middle school clubs, just over 33,000. And then the high school and middle school sports, just over 52,000. We've also recommended to reduce athletics department support staff, which would entail an athletic trainer that's contracted services, and that's just about $10,000, and an administrative assistant, reduce that from 0.4 to 0.2, and that would be a savings of $4,000. We have a kinder camp that is painful to reduce. Really feel it's a proactive program, but again, given the times, regrettably, we're recommending to eliminate that program, and that's $24,000. And then we like to think we're a learning organization, and we want to make sure that professional development continues. But we are going to reallocate the summer professional development K through 12, and that's just about $20,000 as well. Then
Say, Sandy, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I meant to mention in the beginning where we actually added in professional development. What we were doing there was reallocating it from other places. So this is one of the places where it got taken away.
Yep, good
So
point.
that's actually a net 0 in tier 1.
Good, thank you. And then reduce library support staff, and that's 2 positions. And that does have an impact on our schools and the libraries that we have. So those are the the targets that are in tier 3. And again, if, as Kate said earlier, if you go to the bottom of that box, we're now have reduced just over 6 individuals or positions, 6.7, which is about 1.4 million plus. And that's with tier 3. Tier 4, for now, this is our final tier. And this really has an impact on instructional staff. Again, regrettably, with the high school, we're looking at 4 full-time positions. Those are current staff positions. At the middle school, we're looking at 1 position, if that is an unfilled position. And at Wentworth School, due to class sizes, we're able to reconfigure, and we're looking at 2.5 positions. 2 of those are unfilled and 1 is currently filled in that school. And then K through 2 is 1 position, and that's an unfilled position as well. The challenge, I'm not telling anything new to anybody here, but the challenge, particularly at the elementary level in Scarborough, is we see more and more students every year. And it's an opportunity, but it's also a challenge, particularly with the size of those schools and the number of modulars that we have. So we're really carefully watching our enrollment, and it's a work in progress. I guess I'll leave it at that. Kate, anything that I need to expand more on up there?
I think that the one thing that is that you haven't said about this tier, which you kind of alluded to, and it says it right there basically, but we haven't asked our leadership team to nail down exactly which positions they're going to eliminate, because when we got into those conversations, we had conversations about class size, we had conversations about whether instructional coaches were more of a help as a leadership and planning and guidance, whether student supports for academic support was more important than having fewer kids in a classroom. And there are no easy answers for those kinds of reductions. I mean, ideally you need all of these folks, that's why they're there. So what we've said in this tier is that we're committing to reduce a number of FTEs, and that the leadership team is on board with that, but that we're going to take our time to figure out where those should come from and what's the most effective way to make those reductions with the least impact on student services.
Hey, Kate, I just want to make clarification. So when we went through this last night, someone asked the question and made the point that this includes some of the investments that we had put forward. I guess this isn't a complete cut of all new investments, right? So this still does include some of the new investments that we asked for, because there are things that we need. So with that in mind, just looking at the K2 unfilled position, one of the things that was in the budget for FY21 was, I think it was 4 K2 teachers, just to keep up with our enrollment. So how does that relate to this one unfilled? Would that just bring that down to 3?
That's exactly correct. Yeah.
Easy.
So,
okay.
And actually, you folks had asked me last night if there was a way that I could show what we had done as far as maintaining and removing those investments. And I did come up with a worksheet for that. So I'm happy to share that with you afterwards. But you're right. What we've done is we talked about this last night. Some folks would say, oh, well, just take away the new things that you were adding in because you don't have them yet. So you don't, obviously you're not like married to those things, just take them out. But the problem is that some of our new things are really more important to us than some of the things that we're willing to shift and try to work without. And that's a really good example. Like K2, we know we've got incoming kids. We know we're going to have really big numbers at K2 this year. So rather than saying we'll just eliminate the K2 teachers, we're willing to eliminate one of those, and then the other buildings, the other leaders are jumping in and saying that they're going to make the sacrifice so that K2 has the staffing that they need.
Can I ask a question, just for clarification, make sure I follow this? So when I looked at this, when you're going through it, when you said these are unfilled positions, I thought these are positions that already exist and there are vacancies, you're not going to fill them. But following the thread of what you just talked about, these were actually potentially new positions you had put in the original budget, and now you're classifying them as unfilled. Is that correct?
Actually, I didn't clarify between the two. So for example, the middle school is labeled an unfilled position because we have someone retiring. It's an existing person. So in my terminology here, I'm using unfilled position as we don't have to lay someone off. But you're right, I didn't distinguish the one unfilled position that's on this list that's on this page that doesn't exist yet is the K2 teacher. And I believe in tier 2, we had the 3 bus driver positions. Those aren't currently filled at all, but I didn't distinguish between a person who was here and leaving. I guess I'm not describing this very well.
No, I get you. And the only reason I bring it up is I think as we move through our conversations and as we move through them collaboratively, when we go to communicate with the public, I think in the public's mind, in their mind, they're going to have a different perception between if a position was put into the budget but not filled. For them, I think that's not necessarily going to be a cut. They will perceive that differently than a position that already exists and someone's going to retire, we're not going to fill it. So I just think we've had this conversation before as joint communication. We just need to make sure that our terminology is consistent and clear. At least in my mind, there's a big difference between you ask for something in the budget that's not going to be in the budget versus really someone that exists today with a job that is potentially being eliminated. Those are two very different categories to me, and I think it matters to taxpayers. So I just think as we communicate this down the road, we probably should tease out those differences.
So as a point of clarity, most of the positions that are on this list really are current positions that are being filled.
Yeah, if I go back through here just to refresh my memory, Peter, there are 3 unfilled positions for bus drivers, unfilled because we can't fill them because we can't find bus drivers, but not because that's not our normal staffing level.
Correct. It's not because there's not a need for those drivers. It's that there's no one currently sitting in those seats. And so that, in that specific case, that would not create a layoff per se, but there are many other positions that are listed here that do directly impact current staff.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for tonight. I think this is a whole separate discussion with our communication teams about how do we communicate to the community the impacts of those types of things. And I think, at least in my mind, I think most of the audience, if those aren't jobs that exist today, that they're not filled, then it doesn't involve a layoff. That's a different perspective than them assuming these are people that are going to lose their jobs. So for what it's worth.
So I just rolled us forward to the last slide here, which does have a summary of, I think it hits a little bit more the mark of what you're looking for. What's the impact to existing people who currently have jobs? And where it says open positions eliminated, that's where we would need 2 categories. We would need one that says we have it today and someone's retiring, so we don't have to lay them off, because that's what a lot of this is. And then we never had it before and we added it. So I think if we took this one open position category and blew that out into 2 different types, that might help with that piece, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand the flow. I understand what you're saying. I'm just thinking, once we start talking about how we communicate it, then
Yeah.
that's the time.
Well, I think we can put the tags on it that are more specific to the
Yeah,
actual situation. That'll help out with that.
Great.
Sarah, has the school board had a chance to, I know you had a finance committee meeting yesterday, but to review, these areas, and are you comfortable that these are the most logical areas to realize the budget savings from? Or have you not gotten to that point yet?
No, we haven't had the chance to do that yet. So, I mean, we actually chatted very briefly after the meeting yesterday and just realized, in hindsight, we probably should have given ourselves a little bit more time so that we could have come to this meeting with some commentary from the finance committee or from the board. We haven't had the chance to do that. Or I guess I'll speak for myself. I'm assuming April and Alicia, unless you guys found the time today, you're in the same boat. But yeah, we haven't had the opportunity to go through and sort of scrutinize it. So at this point, so we need to do that. Yeah.
No, and John, I think that's a really fair point, like to give people some perspective on where the school board is coming. You guys saw or participated in as much of our meeting as you could last night, and we wrapped up and then we went straight into executive session. And now you're seeing us here tonight at 5 o'clock. So we're all kind of in this rapid fire meeting mode where there hasn't been any real time to process this stuff yet. Yeah, and I think if we were looking at sort of the normal cycles, how this works is sort of after first reading, technically, it's like our budget, right? To go through and sit down, and we spend time with Kate and Sandy and Diane just going through it in more detail, sometimes bringing in department heads to get some more information. We're kind of looking at this as sort of our fresh start, and so that process will now sort of kick off from here. So we'll need to most likely do that in order to be able to give you guys some commentary from the board on top of what you're seeing tonight before you have your first reading.
Yeah, I mean, it's no consolation, but similarly, these are the first times we've seen these numbers from Tom too. So we don't know how the rest of the town council is going to respond either. But I think I know we're not at the end of this, but I think when I reflect back on prior years and we've had challenges, this is really good documentation, really good work to kind of set the stage for that work that's coming for all of us. So thanks for doing this. It's pretty clear about, what the choices are. You guys have done a lot of work. This is great information to guide us through the rest of the process. So thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, just doing some quick math, it collectively, you got us below a 2% target is what I'm coming back to. It looks like around 2.8 million reduction, where I think that we needed 2.5 to get to 2%. So I think that's well within the target that was established earlier on. So whether we like where it's coming from or not, or all of it stays, I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so maybe if it's possible, I don't know if Ruth or Tom could do this, but maybe some quick math, if John's numbers are accurate, we can kind of use that, because I'm sure the public would like to know, after seeing what Tom came in with and now kind of what we're coming in with, where that mill rate falls.
I mean, you can kind of go back maybe to did you have one more piece of this though? Because you guys are adding something back in, right? Or are you not? The capital request, that was a piece of it last night, right? Oh, right there. Yep.
Oh yeah. Yep, sorry.
My picture disappeared, but I'm still here sitting in the dark. Usually my video gives up somewhere around this time when all the kids start gaming. So
you look very pleasant.
Do I look calm and relaxed?
You're like pondering something.
I'm like a large black square. Yeah, we did put a note at the bottom so we don't lose sight of this. Peter, thank you for calling that out, that we have some increases that we need to make to the capital budget, but since these particular projects are already in the budget and they were already slated to be funded through bonding, We didn't consider them as part of the calculations that we did with regard to the tax rate.
I guess I didn't quite understand that because even if we bond something, there's some impact.
Not in FY21,
Oh, okay. Is it-
because the monies wouldn't be bonded until the spring of 2021.
Gotcha. Okay.
And you only then, you're asking for the budget authority, but you're only bonding what you've actually used in that year.
Okay. So thank you.
Yes,
I had
Joy.
a question on something from your original April 8th budget on adult education. Have you guys looked at that at all again as a part of this exercise? I mean, is there any opportunity to combine with another municipality on adult education? Is there any programs that we provide, you know, as a general service to the greater area that there might be grants for or other funding or something like that? Is that anything you've had time to dig into on the adult ed side?
Diane, would you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I can speak to adult education a little bit. So we already do a lot of coordination with other adult education programs. Our adult education director is half-time. We are part of a consortium called the Hub, which is part of Cumberland County. And so there are a lot of regional opportunities. In fact, most people would be surprised to learn that Scarborough people can go to other programs for adult education. Other adults can come to Scarborough for adult education. So there's a lot of fluidity among programs and some really great opportunities that are happening. For example, right now, we're in the process of entering into an agreement with Southern Maine Community College and actually going to have some space physically there to help adult learners make some of those transitions. And so we really get a bang for our buck when we think about adult education. There's a lot of work readiness that's happening with our growing diverse community. We are offering a lot of English as a second language services. And so for the amount that we put up each year for our adult education budget, it's really modest when we take a look at the outcomes that we're able to provide as a result of them.
And do we track Scarborough residents versus non-Scarborough residents using the services? And I think there's some level of state requirement, right? That we have to provide some level. Do you know this
Yes.
law?
Yes.
And what is
Yeah.
the bottom line? I'm flipping through the budget book and I can't find it.
Yeah, I don't have that information with me for this meeting, but certainly we can talk offline if there's other information that you're looking for.
Yeah,
So do
and
you
actually,
track Scarborough residents, even, I know you don't have it, but do you track it?
I would have to get that information.
Okay.
Keep in mind, I'm relatively new to the
Okay.
position here, a few months in, and still learning about all the ins and outs of things.
and Betsy and John, as you know, I mean, I've been around a little too long, probably. As part of our process after this, we will schedule departments to come. I mean, we're going to meet every Wednesday night for what, about a month, Tom? 6 weeks or something like that. But usually what we will do is we will have this conversation with the Board of Education, and that's where we will go, have the conversation specifically about their budget and line items and that type of thing to ask these types of questions. I think tonight was trying to really just create a landscape to say our goal was to get close to 2%. I think, I know the piece came down. I don't know if we can go back to Tom's original slide, which I think would give us a pretty good idea of where we're landing. Or Tom,
I just did the math, and forgive me, but I'll be presumptuous to look to the total savings that's been talked about from the town and the school side alike. Remarkably, the combined effort brings us to within $200 of the target of 1.5%. I assure you that was not done by design, but it's remarkably close. So it's really, it's at 1.5% at this point, assuming that you would,
Is that using
level
tier
f-
4, Tom?
that is, I beg your pardon. I presumed I was just looking at whatever was presented this evening. I think if you look at tier 3, I didn't do the math, but it's going to be, I don't know, my guess is probably 2.2, something like that. We can model those with some more accuracy after the fact.
So can I ask a question, Peter? So I just want to understand on the revenue side, are we still projecting a $25,000 increase or $500,000 in building permits?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, Betsy, I think what we'll do is, and actually we're going to have, those sessions that we have, those every Wednesday night from you and John, just let us know who you want to have come in front of us and we can ask those questions. I think that's a great question for Tom, that usually we work through those things through sort of that process. I think all we're trying to do tonight is to say, did this collective work we've done since the last time we kind of have a conversation, it sure sounds like we have delivered a tool set by which we could start the conversation about where we're starting from. It sounds like, Tom, with the level 4, would you say we're 1.5 or $200 off 1.5%?
Yes.
So I think, and that we know those conversations weren't easy. I know Tom's conversations weren't easy. I think I'm comfortable, and I don't know about the rest of the teams here, that I think we've delivered what we asked. You've delivered what we sort of indicated as a starting point for the conversation. I think that's a great starting point. Is everybody comfortable with that, where we are as kind of at least the structure and the choices that we have in front of us?
I am, Peter. I think there's an awful lot of uncertainty in front of us, and I think this is at least a signal to the public that we are taking it seriously, and we're going to try to do the best we can to manage any impact on the taxpayer and staff, and try to strike the right balance. So I think this was actually fantastic work by both the school department and the town to start at a very difficult target.
A very different point from where we've been before. Anybody else have comments? I mean, are folks comfortable? Are we? And then I guess the other question tonight on the agenda was, there's some logistics about, I'm assuming we're going to, at this point it's scheduled for next Wednesday night, the 6th, to kind of do this as a formal town council sort of presentation or whatever. We can talk about what that means and logistics. My guess, and maybe others can go around, my guess is that this is a great start. I think there will be some interest, and we'll have some pressure about what does getting to a flat increase look like. I think that will probably be a conversation that we'll probably be having also, but we sure are a lot closer than we were. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, comments. One question for this group would be, once we deliver and we kind of get a consensus of where we are, do we want to continue these joint meetings to try to work through the rest? If there's any more adjustments that need to be made, or the adjustments, do we want to use this format to kind of work together? And I'll just kind of open it up for comments about how would both bodies like to work with each other?
So I don't mind jumping in there. I'm definitely comfortable on the school side because I don't think I'm being inconsistent here. When we had this meeting last, I was very focused on budget, and since they don't generate revenues other than what they get from the state, which they can't control, then they have focused on budget. On the municipal side, we've also done budget work, but we're focused on the net, which includes the revenue. So I guess I'm not at a place yet where I understand the budget changes. I understand what the school budget changes. I'm not sure I understand what our operational budget changes at this point. I understand the net number, including the revenue. On the school side, I think it's a great starting point. I think they really looked hard at their budget, and I think we did too on that municipal side. So there's no no problems here. I think the joint meetings are helpful, but you know, I suppose we could just continue to send over information if people don't want to have them.
I guess, Peter, I kind of see us branching into our own realms with some interaction, but
Yeah.
we need to dive into the municipal budget, the details, and get to understand them. And I think they need to do the same thing on the school side. And maybe we schedule the review of the school budget towards the tail end of, sorry, April, I don't know if you tried to say something there. But, well,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
well, I was kind of thinking that if we're going to have meetings monthly, weekly, with different departments, that maybe we try to do the school one towards the tail end of that, so that they have a chance to go through their work and then regroup.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I
Go ahead,
mean,
comment.
my comment to that would be whatever's helpful to the council. We as a school board obviously need time to process this and go through, and we're going to make adjustments and have these discussions on our side. I definitely heard tonight that there is some interest in, reconvening and having the school budget presentation, as we have done in the past. And so in terms of whether we schedule our meeting, I hesitate to think about scheduling our meeting too close towards the end of those processes, John, only because if there's some significant shifts that need to happen, because we are the largest piece of the pie, we would definitely want to have some time, and I don't want second reading to creep up on us. So I would be comfortable, honestly, just kind of checking back in after the school board has had some time to go through, and then scheduling our department meeting with the town council, once we've had that some time to do that work. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that approach. And I guess the only other thing I would add to it is I don't know how much of that we can realistically and thoughtfully do between now and next Wednesday, to give you guys a better indication before your first reading. So I think my ask of you guys for first reading would be, well, do what you want. You have the information that we've provided, but we're going to need time to go through it between first and second reading as we normally do. So I guess based on what I heard you guys say at the beginning of the meeting, it doesn't sound like there's more information that would come between now and next Wednesday necessarily that would potentially change your trajectory or your goal of getting to around the 2%. So I know, Peter, you alluded to the fact that there may be some interest in getting to a flat budget. I guess I would just say we'll continue to work towards the 2% between now and unless we get any other further directive from you guys.
Yeah.
It's probably worth noting too that I know, Tom, you did the math off of tier 4, which is obviously worst case scenario, but it's our goal obviously to not have it be tier 4. And so just trying to work through those scenarios as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to our question, I don't think there'll be any further directives, if you will, between now and Wednesday. I don't know what you're comfortable with. I thought this matrix that you produced tonight was really informative. I mean, one of our goals is, so our community that is wanting a 0% increase, so those, at least those in the community that are, at least can understand what that looks like. And even at a 2%, you've done a great job of encapsulating, these are the pain points that are included to get there. And so I don't know how the rest feel. I mean, I think these meetings do help. Just like you, we don't know where the rest of the town council members are. They may be listening in, they may not. I think we'll have a lively conversation Wednesday night just about where, and there'll probably be some direction out of there about, sort of like the Goldilocks. Are we warm? Are we close? Or do we need to do some more work? And I think if we do need to do some more work, I guess the question becomes, do we go into our corners and do that? Or do we sit at a table and say, now what? And I think maybe we just reconvene after Wednesday night so we understand sort of where we are and what's needed and what's the best way forward.
Yeah, that works. And I think just to clarify, I think I kind of was circling a lag in there just to be a little bit more direct. Like, this feels like because of how we've changed the process, it may appear to some that the first reading is not actually the starting point, when if we use our traditional logic, that the first reading is the starting point. So I'm hoping that we're continuing to use that as the sort of the starting date next Wednesday from which we'll iterate from. So yes, I agree. Let's reconvene next week, or after you guys have your meeting, and figure out how we want to move forward. But I think we can all agree that the joint sessions have been so far collaborative and productive.
If I could, Sarah, I think last meeting you asked for, as clear direction as possible in terms of what the request was. I mean, I'll be recommending to the council that their action in first reading should reflect certain changes on both town and school and capital, touch all those areas. Typically, we don't have that level of specificity at first reading. But I think given the level of effort that we've undertaken in advance of first reading, we have that this time. I know it felt terribly uncomfortable last year when the council simply modified the bottom line and we were unclear as to how we get there. So to the extent that we can, I'm going to encourage the council to be clear in its first reading action where the kind of order of magnitude cuts are to come from. Does that make sense?
I didn't understand that last sentence.
Well, if the council simply takes action to take $2.5 million out of the total net budget, that will certainly achieve the goal. But what it won't do is give us clarity as to where that proportional share, where that allocation of the reduction is to come from. And we've just had the benefit of doing some advanced work. So I would suggest that there's some clarity now. I don't want to suggest what the council will do, but I think as much clarity as possible will be helpful for all of us.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused on our process because, so I guess we're going to say all questions are going to come after first read. Is that, because I mean, I'm looking, and I'm great at beating dead horses, so I'll keep doing it. It's not a dead horse. But, we're looking at community services, summer rec at a $30,000 increase, 6.7, revenue of 480K. So, I mean, when are we going to take a look at that type of revenue projections? Because it all impacts that mill rate. I mean, the budget is the budget and people are doing a great job looking at the budget, but the mill rate greatly takes into account the $21 million revenues or whatever. And it's not all of it, but, I'm just wondering when we're going to line item go by that, because if we take a look at that, that may require more cuts on the budget sides. And that's why I'm asking that. Yeah,
Betsy, I mean, it's a painful process, but we actually, for the town side on the budget, we will actually go through that budget book and actually, I sent out today, which departments do you want to talk to? I had said community service is one we always look at because it's pretty complex. But that's the time where Tom will be there, the staff of community services will be there, or in the case of public safety, they'll be there. And actually we get into we were talking about ambulance fee schedules one year. So we will be looking at those. So what happens between first and second read, we will do that level of work as a finance committee. What comes out of that, we work with the town manager, but we will actually make a recommendation back to the town council saying, we've gone through the budgets. Here are we recommend we change or we adjust, and we bring it back to the town council. And then we do that in a time frame by time we approach the second read, which is the approval, the town council will decide whether those things you've identified as places we need to make adjustments actually occur. So that's sort of the process. In the past, these two groups haven't worked together on that level of detail, and we kind of, pardon the pun, but we kind of go to our corners. We'll go to the corner with the work Tom's done and kind of go over it with a fine tooth comb and answer those questions you're asking are perfectly appropriate, and we'll ask those. It sounds like the Board of Education, I mean, they just got this information yesterday. They're going to have to kind of go back and socialize it also with the rest of their team. And I'm sure they might make, I think Kate said it best. These are 30,000 mile level placeholders. There may be some tweaks that are made in between the different departments. We usually don't get involved in that level of detail of the school budget. It's more of the bottom line. So.
Right, yeah, I definitely understand that.
Okay.
I think what's so unusual about this year is probably revenues. I mean, if this were a normal year, I would look at them and maybe ask Tom a few questions, but that would pretty much be it. Clearly he knows the revenues and knows them well and what's going to be coming into the town. What I see this year is, a very different potential picture. And that's the point of discussion, I think, amongst the board. And I guess I'm trying to understand the impact on the BOE if we come back and say, instead of reducing revenues projections by 300, we think it's going to have to be reduced by, $1 million or 700 or whatever. And then that's what gets us to this mill rate. And now we're going to be asking the BOE or somebody for more quote unquote cuts to the projected budgets. So that's the piece that's a little unusual to me. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around it because I think the revenues, are something that we're going to look more closely at than we probably do in normal years.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that's a fair statement, but I think that is part of the normal process. Usually what we'll do between first and second read, which is why I asked the question about this group. As Tom said at the top, there may be more information that comes. Maybe we get better clarity on what's going to happen to state revenue sharing. Maybe we'll get better clarity about other things, but as we work our budgets, if it gets to the point, the Board of Education may come back and, who knows what as they work through their process, it's going to be important for us to communicate. And if state revenues change, that changes the calculus for all of us, but we have to have that sort of communication and feedback loop. But I don't think we can do that tonight. I think what our intent tonight was, just to make sure by the time we approach Wednesday that the collective teams have delivered something that the town council said they wanted to see, which was some numbers that got us to 2%-ish. And I think we've achieved that. And then we can have conversations. And I think to get to Tom's point, there probably will be more clarity. And I think Tom's going to try to guide the council to give as much clarity as we can next Wednesday night when we see these numbers about where it needs to be. Is that a fair statement, Tom, you think, of where we are?
Yeah, and I'm probably getting into the weeds here, but there's a budget order that includes all the kind of aggregate numbers, if you will, and that's the action item the council considers. Typically, that budget order, and we have prepared it based on Sandy and my starting point. I will not speak for the school. I don't think they're in a position at all to say we want to change that. I suspect they want to go forward with their original request. I'm going to assume that. And so if the council wishes to take action other than simply adopting in first reading, you'll need to amend the budget as presented. And my point is you need to be clear where those amendments come from. For my part, I could modify that budget order to reflect the material I presented tonight. And so for first reading, that may be satisfactory for council. And so no amendment to the town side. So I'm just trying to think ahead as to how the first reading action is going to happen and serve your purpose that you stated.
Yeah. All right.
If I might add to that, I mean, to me, you've prepared the budget book based on what you presented. I think a logical starting point is that budget order. And then if we're going to amend it, we amend it on both sides based on information, the work that you've done since then. Unless you want to redo the budget book, but
No.
I don't.
Yeah, so
not
that's a great
well-
question. I was wondering on the budget book. So like, for example, do we think there's going to be an increase in general assistance due to unemployment, layoffs, whatever? Are any parameters changed in the budget book, or the budget book is the budget book, and then you can give us like the line item cross out of what changed? I'm just trying to figure out what we're going to get between now and Wednesday.
You're not, I beg your pardon. There's no physical way that I can produce a new budget book. So
Well,
the
I'm not
budget book-
asking for a budget book, but you've changed. So can you give us the line items that you changed? I guess I'm trying to take my budget and then put it back in, put lines in.
Councilor Gleisteen, just for instance, the personnel cuts will affect hundreds of line items. And so I think I can provide you the level of detail so you know where they're coming from.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's of value for you to see specific line item detail. I mean, I just can't produce that for you in this short term.
Okay. I just don't, because you already have the line item detail, and I don't want to work off a line item detail that's different, if you know what I mean. Like, if I'm working off a wrong assumption, it's because I misunderstood what changed in the line item detail. So, if I'm working off starting in page, well, you know where the line item detail is. So I'm just trying to reconcile that and how that works, and how that, because this is such an unusual year, and now we're making changes before first read. So I'm just trying to reconcile what we're looking at.
Yeah, well, let's take our piece of that discussion off the table just for a second. For the Board of Education, I just want to get clear. So Tom, you're suggesting that, I guess my question to the Board of Education, are you going to meet between now and next Wednesday as a whole group? Probably not, right?
As a whole, as a board?
As a board,
No.
yeah. So which,
No, we have a meeting on Thursday.
so which numbers do you want to read into the order, or do you want, so you're not going to pick either, option one, phase one, or pipe, what was your terminology? Tier one,
Tier.
tier three, tier four, you're not going to pick one of those to present. You want to revert back to the original budget? Is that what you're
Do you
saying?
want us to pick? I choose tier one. I'm joking.
Clarify,
But,
did you guys already approve what was presented? Haven't you already done your
We
first-
didn't do. We have already had our first reading. Peter, is kind of it's a bit out of order, right? Because what we have here is reductions to what our first reading
Right.
was. So I think the way I look at this, and April and Alicia, please jump in if you guys feel otherwise, is, we have no intentions of presenting you guys anything else between now and your first reading. You have the information as to what sort of the impacts will be to our programs and services with whatever cuts or decisions you decide to make. So I think the ball is in your court, and then we'll take your directive for next week and go from there.
I would just like to say that I really appreciate Tom's comments and agree with him that type of guidance from the council would be helpful, and will assist us in digging in and doing our work. The sooner we can get some of those answers. And
Okay.
and I also appreciate, Peter, that you've been trying to work collaboratively with us, and happy to reconvene at any point when you're ready to sort of give us that guidance.
But you guys will be okay. I just want to make sure, so we, you learn from past.
Right.
You learn from organization. So I think what Tom was suggesting, that might be the council action, that if what is in the order that Tom is suggesting would be your originally presented budget. But then what Tom is suggesting, the council might take action to say, we're going to overwrite that number by a different number based on the work that you've done. And I hear you've got tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. I hear the finance committee saying tier 1's their preference. But Tom, you're saying that would be the appropriate or the best way to handle it for the council to be really definitive about whatever number we want to get to, how that's going to be divided between the municipal side and the school side? Is that what?
Yeah, very much so. I think everyone needs to know what the expectation is. And
Okay.
and there's more work to be done. I also think it's important for us to send a very clear and early signal to the community. And based on my assessment, and this is only mine, that I cannot imagine the council approving a budget above 2.5. And so I see that as, that's the anti-money just to start the conversation. So,
Tom, can I suggest that maybe staff try to assemble what we went through today at a budget order level of detail, so that we might have something that might look similar to an amendment?
Sure.
That maybe the finance committee can, but I kind of see that as our role. We had guidance from the council to try to come in under 2% at first read. So it probably should be the finance committee that makes that amendment.
Sure. I will put the mechanics together. I'll need final guidance as to what specific amendments for the relative parts of the budget that you want to see.
Thanks.
Okay, so we can reconvene and talk about that. Okay. Anything else?
So yeah, if I could just add my perspective, and it echoes a lot of what's already been said, but just to make sure, or maybe even just say it in a different way, is what we brought forward from our staff was the guidance that we had gotten out of a joint meeting that happened a few weeks ago in response to the COVID crisis. And so we went back to our staff and asked them to prepare for what we knew was a new budget goal of no more than a 2% increase to the mill rate. They did that. We've made it clear they presented us with that last night, and that by no means has the finance committee had time to go through or do our normal due diligence as we would before a typical first read. But it's important for us that you guys as a finance committee see what work has been done and what sacrifices will need to be made, so that that informs your decision when you make your amendments for first read. And so we are certainly not endorsing this or saying, yes, we support, this level of cut, or we think we should go to tier 4. I'm not even prepared to speak to that at all at this point. But we did, we laid the foundation for what the council expressed was the overall goal. And that's really where we're at.
Okay.
Well said.
That's fair.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, anything else, anybody this evening?
So Peter, you do have a question from one of your fellow counselors, if you'd like to address that.
Great, okay, well. What else, Ken?
So Councillor Hamill says, I feel it is the job of the town manager and the superintendent and their teams to find the reductions and to deliver the targets. We asked for 2% and it looks like we're trending well. Nice work so far, trending well. We need to see what 0% looks like. The sooner we see this, the better for all of us.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments. And I think that, that will be part of the conversation we have, Wednesday night. I think what we're talking about is trying to get to the starting gate Wednesday night. And I think we have a plan for that. I think that work, I think it's what we had discussed earlier. If the council consensus is Wednesday night, that the target's not 2%, the target's something else just because of some of the circumstances and changes. I think it's been clear that the town manager is suggesting we need to give clear guidance. So, I think that's will be the additional work that might be done between first and second read. We've identified what it looks like to get to the original target we identified, or the modified target of 2%. I think we will get to that work of what does it look like for closer to a flat rate, but I don't think we'll be there Wednesday night. Is that, anybody else?
I think that's well put, Peter. And I guess I want to encourage you not to feel like you need to get there Wednesday night. I think we can use this time and use it wisely to better understand our circumstance. I think there is a deep appreciation for the severity of the situation. So we are starting at a much, much improved position. This is usually where we end up. We don't, not even at this point, frankly. So please appreciate that for what it is and appreciate the fact that I think everyone's willing to work hard over the next several months.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, I've been doing this, I think I've been on the finance committee for 6 years. This is the most collaborative and sort of the work that has been done this year to get us to this starting place is remarkably different than what's happened in prior years. So I think hopefully we're signaling to the community what Tom just said, that we know how serious this is. We're all trying to do the best we can to deliver the right balance between where we are. So I think really applaud for all of you for the work that's gotten us to where we are. And again, it's part of the starting process.
Councillor Hayes, I just want to let you know you have another question that just came in from a resident that's been watching the meeting. Would you like to address that?
Sure.
Okay. Jim Pritchard writes, is the school department planning to talk with the union for concessions?
So we have done that, and also done some correspondence to our employees. And actually, we have regular meetings with the union on a regular basis. And I'm very sensitive to these reductions. And this does become the school board's budget at this point in time. And I think collaboratively, we will try to do the best that we can, knowing that we have the best interest of our students and we want them to continue to learn and grow. But I too, Peter, think that this has been very collaborative. It's incredibly hard work. I appreciate Tom's leadership on the town side, and certainly working with our unions and our teachers and the board. I know this is challenging work, but we have to think with our heads and not overreact, and just really kind of lead by example for our students and our community. I think that's really critical, and we'll get through this and we'll make the right decisions. And I just, to come back to your point, yes, we have communicated to the labor unions and tried to inform them of what we're doing and what the next steps are.
I just have another process question. I know Sarah and Kate both said the document is out on their website that was shared by the school today. The document the town shared, I'm sorry, where is that located? I know it just got finished. I'm not criticizing. I'm just trying to find out where I can look at it in more depth and where residents can.
I will make sure it's up before I leave the office tonight.
Okay, thanks.
Larissa, any other questions from the audience, from public?
Nope, there are no questions that have come in through this Zoom meeting.
Okay. Anybody want to have any parting comments, or are people ready to adjourn? Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Anybody second? Somebody please second.
Second.
Motion by Councillor Clucci, seconded by Councillor Gleisteen. Do you wish to do a roll call vote? This is a formal meeting and I think you're required to do so.
Sure, let's do a roll call.
Am I roll calling all 6 elected officials or simply town? All six,
I think. Yeah.
Okay, school board member Slyther.
Yes.
School board member Giftos.
Yes.
School board member, school board member Layton.
Yes.
Councillor Clucci.
Yes.
Councillor Gleisteen.
Yes.
Councillor Hayes.
Yes. I guess we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. It's a great.
Good job, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Have a good
Thank you,
night.
everybody. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.